Regarding Men with Paul Elam, Janice Fiamengo, and Tom Golden. Number 1, Gillette and the APA Guidelines.
Welcome everyone to our new program, a three-way conversation between me, Janice Fiamengo, Tom Golden, and Paul Elam, called Regarding Men, where we're going to talk about issues of the week that affect men. And we thought the best way to start off this week was to plunge into a discussion of the Gillette ad that, of course, everybody knows about and everyone has already had plenty to say about. We're going to connect that also to the recent release of the APA guidelines. That's the American Psychological Association, with which a couple weeks ago, I guess, released its new guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men, which astounded us and many other people with its knee-jerk reflex anti-male regurgitation of every single feminist platitude about masculinity and its deadliness to women, men, and the community at large that's ever come out of academia and the feminist community at large. So we felt that the Gillette ad is a kind of 2-minute encapsulation of a lot of the same ideas that are being given formal psychological approval in the APA guidelines. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to each say a few words about the Gillette ad and in relation to the APA guidelines if we want, and then we're going to have a conversation more generally. Is that right, guys?
Sounds good.
Sounds like the way to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, a couple things that I wanted to say about the Gillette ad in particular. I did a very short little no joke Janice about this, and the thing that struck me looking at Kim Gehrig, the ad maker, looking at her work more generally in relation to the Gillette ad, was the stark difference between her representations of women in the ads that she's made to sell products to women, including feminine hygiene products and lipstick and that sort of thing, all of which are incredibly, of course, female positive. She herself has said that they're all about representing women as intelligent and multi-dimensional beings. When it comes to the Gillette ad, of course, she is not interested at all in representing men as intelligent or as multi-dimensional. And so it seemed to me that actually the difference between the two ads could be summed up by saying that her female positive messaging in the ads focused on women, it's often got a kind of erotic energy to it.
Yeah.
Women are presented, certainly the Viva la Vulva is explicitly erotic, but even the one where she's got one where this American comedian and writer is portrayed putting on her lipstick with her 3 good girlfriends, and they're getting prepared to go out on a women's night out, and they're laughing and joking and having a wonderful time and bantering with one another, and they are presented as witty and self-possessed and wry, and the idea that comes across is that women are complete in themselves. They don't need men. They don't rely on men for their self-definition or for their sense of identity and their pleasure in who they are. And there's this very strong sense of women's sort of self-pleasuring and erotica in these ads. That women don't need anything to feel good. That female spaces are by their nature both comforting and pleasuring. Whereas male spaces are not, there's nothing good about male spaces at all. And if you look at that Gillette ad, what really struck me was the hideousness of the men's, their awful contorted faces as they laugh at these images of supposed male sexual degradation of women. And also that very chilling image of the men staring into the mirrors, as if in search of their, I said desiccated personhood in my video, but this idea that men, they don't even have a self. That's
right.
According to feminist Kim Gehrig. And so it struck me that her Gillette ad is really a kind of non-sexual form of feminist pornography, in that it creates a situation. Like the feminists have always said that pornography is the graphic sexual representation of female degradation. The viewer is supposedly male, and what pornography is all about is telling women that they enjoy their sexual degradation. Now that's a whole other subject, but if we look at the Gillette Ad, we could say that it is really a feminist representation of men as empty vessels. Their every gesture in that ad exists to confirm the female viewer's superior humanity. And the source of the female viewer's pleasure, at least the projected female viewer's pleasure, is male degradation and the message that men don't have a self. The only self they can have in that ad is a self that, there is no positive representation of masculinity. The only way in which they can even attain feminist approval is by warring against one another, essentially stopping other men from their violence. That's the only positive thing they can do. There's no other idea that there even could be. And once all the toxic masculinity is cleared up, according to the worldview of Tim Gehrig, I don't know what men would do, because all they can do that's good is stop boys or men from beating each other up or degrading women. So it's a frightfully it's a frightfully anti-male representation. That's what really struck me.
I think what hit me too while I was watching and noticing the same thing, Janice, is that they did have examples of what we all might consider, the great traits about masculinity, men helping children, breaking up fights, instilling discipline in young people, that sort of thing. But it was portrayed in that film as corrected masculinity, because that they talked about men are starting to behave better.
Right.
As though they've gotten enough of the feminist messaging that now we have the good men. And of course, they need to be set loose against the bad men and to act as the muscle for these ideologues who really believe they're changing the nature of masculinity. But what also strikes me about this, and I hate to be the one to do it because, they say never breach Godwin's law. But the fact of the matter is that the Nazis had a really sophisticated propaganda machine demonizing the Jewish population that led up to their ability to dispatch that population with much less resistance from the general population. And no, I'm not saying that the aim for men is the same as the Nazis' aim for Jews. But clearly, if we look at the reality on the ground, we're seeing men are departing higher education in droves. They're departing employment. They're being replaced. Even programs like Me Too are pushing for more women in positions of power, not based on merit, but based on their sex, period, end of story. And which is equivalent to saying men being disqualified from things based on their sex. So to me, it fits the pattern that you have a propaganda machine going which is its aim is to enrich the lives of one sex at the expense of the other, which is, exactly, interestingly enough, what a lot of people accuse patriarchy of being. That's the big complaint about patriarchy, is that men have always sat on the edge of their seats, twirling their mustaches, thinking of ways to oppress women and minorities. And of course, there was a racial component to this too, to that video. They showed mainly Black men being the feminist muscle, mainly white men being the offenders. And that's an entirely another discussion that could come out of this. But all of this made me feel that it ties right into the APA agenda, that you have the old Division 51 of the APA and the ideologues that ran that place and that silenced any voices of dissent and silenced anybody that wanted to talk about biological differences between men and women, and silenced anybody that wanted to point out that bad characteristics weren't necessarily gendered, that women were capable of evil, so were men, that human beings are a mixed bag, which common sense tells us is absolutely true. But they've said about, from the American Psychological Association, who, by the way, accredits in a lot of states, you can't complete your education as a psychologist without the approval of the APA.
It's amazing.
And now the APA is insisting on instructing people that men are bad, women are good, men are perpetrators, women are victim. These stereotypes, bigoted stereotypes, one after another. And it's almost to me like the APA and Kim Gehrig / Gillette were doing a dance with each other with this really toxic message.
Same team.
And that was my takeaway from it. I was not surprised.
When I was a part of the mailing list of Division 51, I used to talk about male positive things and about, men are good and whatever. It would really piss everybody off. And I'd get these messages from guys on the mailing list. It was a huge mailing list. It was probably, who knows, a couple thousand people. I forget how many. But I'd get these messages from these guys on the list who were younger psychologists. And they were saying, thank you for standing up for men and boys. I wish I could agree with you, but I can't. Because if I said anything, they'd throw me out. And you're right. They could completely decertify them anytime they wanted to. So really what we're looking at is bullies. These people are bullies in the worst sort of way, in an ideological way that cuts people off. Of course, they eventually threw me out, as did they threw out most other people who were saying good things about men. And they've just honed themselves down to this narrow line about what they're about. And it's only about the feminist line. They're going to be those good men who come in and save the day. And that's what they're about today. It's really sad.
Can I ask you a question, Tom?
Go for it.
I know that when I look at things like the Gillette ad and I look at the financial motivation, we know one, and it's a shame that, bashing men sells products to women in this culture.
Yes.
It's sad, but it happens and it's a reality. So I see the profit motive there. Your experience with these men in places like Division 51, what is it that you believe drives them? Is it self-loathing? Is it just pure bald gynocentrism? Some other personal pathology? I just can't wrap my head around a helping professional, a psychologist, taking a path in life that I'm going to demonize half the population and attack their self-esteem, their self-respect, their self-worth. I mean, that is so against every principle that as a practicing clinician I've ever striven for in my life.
Yes.
And it just blows my mind that it happens.
And all I can tell you, Paul, is that I struggle in the same way. I struggled then. I'd scratch my head and say, how could anyone think that way? And I think the biggest clue we can get is when you look at their mission statement. The mission statement says, we're in debt to feminism, for this, that, and the other. And that tells you something. They feel as though they are indebted to feminism. And so they're going to speak in terms of paying back that debt. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing I could come up with. And they are so literally brainwashed. I mean, it's total that they cannot see anything other than their own feminist blinded view of what reality is. It's really sad because these are brilliant people. These are really smart people, I know they're smart, but daggone, they can't see reality.
I mean, they certainly do mention that very explicitly in the opening to the APA guidelines. They say that that there are many gender experts who have worked on reforming the APA's approach to treating women, and they are now turning their attention to, creating these guidelines for treating men. And they also have a whole rationale where they talk about how up until, just a few decades ago, the entire history of psychological study was supposedly the study of men, and that it was, in its nature, anti-female. Now, I don't know whether that's true, because I have no understanding of the history of psychology.
It's not true.
No, of course not.
Or anything. Yeah, I would be very surprised if it were, but certainly that's what they say. And it often strikes me that this is part of the problem, is that all of these so-called social justice or reform movements start from the premise that up until about 1980, the entire world had nothing good to say about women. And that, the entire world was a patriarchal plot to oppress and to demean and to degrade and to objectify and to dehumanize women. So believing that, then, a little bit of objectification and degradation and dehumanization of men now is, maybe a kind of move towards cosmic justice. I mean, why you would think that, I don't know, because you'd have to believe in some kind of collective revenge. But I do think there's always that idea that up until just a few years ago, women were not treated as fully human. And therefore now if we dehumanize men, well, so what? They've been the center of everything, since the first day of civilization. So, and that's there in the APA guidelines. So I think that must be part of the rationale.
Mom and apple pie, right?
Yeah, I know. Well,
we hate women. Yeah. Mom and apple pie.
Well, I've also got a 3-word response to that, is Belfort Bax.
Yes.
Wrote about feminism as far back as the late 1800s. He wrote a really definitive text in 1913. He was subsequently run out of all the publishing houses because he challenged feminist, the feminist narrative.
Yes.
And
well, I studied women writers in the late 19th century. They didn't feel, they had grievances, certainly. They were already articulating the feminist grievance model, but they did not feel powerless. They knew they weren't. They knew that they had social power. Right. And they were able to draw on a whole stock of images and ideas about female moral superiority that precisely enabled them to make their points very powerfully in the public sphere and to immediately get a whole slew of men on their side.
Right.
So this idea that women were always considered, somehow not human is obviously false. But it's a very well entrenched idea, and it justifies all manner of unfairness to men now. And we really have to. But it's very difficult now because so much of history has been rewritten by academics.
Yes.
Even if you try to research, you have to go to the primary sources, and that takes a heck of a long time, and it's very difficult for a lot of us to do. But if you simply read a history written by an academic, it's going to have the slant right there already. And so it's going to confirm what everybody suspects, which is that the history was so oppressive to women. So we've got a real problem.
Well, I have an idea about that, and that is I see a real crash coming, a huge crash. One is that most people are thinking this feminist stuff is right. But the other is that the research is saying something completely and utterly different. The more they study testosterone, the more they're starting to see that it is really related to the kinds of things that the APA and the Gillette commercial are against. They know now that testosterone pushes men to strive for status, to compete. And that's exactly what these people hate. They hate that. Oh, God. But so we've got the reality of the research on testosterone and the whole feminist idea. It's going to collide one of these days, hopefully.
I think it already has. That Gillette video is already well over 1 million dislikes.
Let's get up to 60.
Which I would say 5 years ago, I would have just said that was an impossible dream.
I know, Paul.
That so 1 million people would find that. So I think there are people catching on to the narrative, and
yes.
It's about time.
I would guess that a very small percentage of those people know about this testosterone research and know about the reality that men are the way they are for good damn reason, you know? And the research is so clear.
And it's pretty hard to imagine a functioning civilization without the drive to compete.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
It's pretty hard to imagine the technological wonders that we all benefit from, the life-saving medical technology and, everything else. So the technology that we're using to have this conversation, absolutely impossible to imagine in a feminist society.
Oh, come on, Janice. Women would have invented all that stuff if men hadn't gotten in the way.
Yeah. And so they do somehow imagine that we can have, I do think that the feminist goal is, I don't know whether it's explicitly articulated in every case, sometimes it is to have women in all positions of management and to have men continue running the show, doing, working the sewers and the electrical grid and all, the things that men do. I do think that is kind of the feminist utopia, but and I think it can go that way for quite a bit longer before it ultimately collapses, because it does seem that there's something about the male nature to simply keep on going. I always dream of a men's strike. Let's have a men's strike. Let's have men go on strike for 2 full days and refuse to do any of that stuff and bring the whole bloody civilization to a halt. I would just love that. And do it in a nice way. It doesn't have to be an angry way. And just say, this is the work of men.
Indeed.
But men won't do it. I know that it wouldn't fly. Otherwise, I'd say we should call for it. But it just won't, because men can't stand. Men like to, they like to keep things going. That's right. They feel a very deep need. So that makes me worry that we will keep going along the path we're going on for a long time yet until it collapses.
Feminism is predicated on the necessity for men to continue to be blind to the disadvantages in their role and to continue to be willing to be disposable in order to take care of women. That is the great irony to me of feminism as it is anyway, is that without men's willingness to sacrifice, feminism would not exist. It wouldn't be able to happen.
The whole deal is fueled by gynocentrism. Men are completely blue-pilled and blind to any red pill stuff because they've taken this gynocentric pill that says, oh, I will serve. I will take care of her.
I think it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think it's in our DNA.
I think so too. One of these days we'll find it.
Yep.
Until then, we'll struggle.
Yes, until then, we'll continue. Well, I know that at the very least, I can tell by looking that nobody of the three of us needs Gillette razor products.
We're all boycotting Gillette.
So we're good on that.
There you go.
And so listen up, guys. If you ever wanted an excuse to be a neckbeard, this is it.
Indeed. Fire it up, man. Fire it up. Good.
Well, why don't we move on then and talk about one of the ideas that we had for this segment, this discussion, whatever we want to call this thing, was to recognize somebody out there in the world, probably somebody that doesn't get recognition from our community on a regular basis, and to recognize somebody else who also deserves our attention for different reasons. And so we will start with a positive mention of Piers Morgan. And do either one of you have the tweet he retweeted available?
No, I looked for it. I couldn't find it.
Well, I can paraphrase it easy enough. He did tweet that that what Gillette was doing was asking men to buy their razor blades and cut off their own balls with it.
True.
And of course, now I've seen, and I will, Tom, I will get you the links for it. I've seen a handful of articles already now calling Piers Morgan an MRA. Like, go team.
Poor Piers.
Good for Piers. I've often found him a very infuriating man, but on this file, he's been fantastic. I really admired his passion and his anger and his willingness to say it.
Amen.
And we don't have to 100% approve of anybody that we nominate for this recognition. I don't agree with everything that he says either, for sure. But this one was a home run. And fair to point out, it was a retweet. He was not the original person that made the statement, but he certainly painted a target on his back for the sisterhood when he retweeted that statement.
Yeah.
When he went on public television talking about, his utter
Exactly.
disgust with the ad. And yeah, I know he's been really forthright about it and courageous.
So he gets the first Regarding Men award.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, cheers to you, peers.
Cheers to
Definitely.
Piers.
And now we have another bit of recognition that we have affectionately termed the Flying Puta. Any of you from Texas like me knows what that means. If you don't, use your Spanish to English translation and you'll get it. PUTA. The Flying Puta Award goes to Janice?
Kim Gehrig.
Kim
Yes.
Gehrig, the
Mhm.
director of the Gillette commercial.
Definitely. Yeah, that was a perfect encapsulation of the anti-male zeitgeist of our time. And it is indeed a masterful and very polished piece of propaganda. But its motives are absolutely disgusting.
Yep. Amen.
We will link to that below too, so you can go in and get your downvote on that video if you haven't already. Also, in issuing this award, we were having discussions about the needed graphic for this. Tom, you want to make the appeal?
Yeah, any graphic artists out there, please, if you would like to, we'd love to have a great either still image or even a video of a flying Puta. And Paul and I were thinking of flying jackass, but, be creative, see what you come up with. And if you don't, in the meantime, I'll create one and we'll see where it goes. But I'd much rather see what you can do because I'm no pro.
And we know there's some pros out there. They send us stuff all the time, and and bless you guys for doing that. It's a big help to get help from the community in that way. So if you want to design a Flying Puta award, we will be happy to play it or to show it as a part of this discussion.
I would love to see a flying Puta go across the screen when we announce who wins,
There you go. and that we can do.
I'll bet we can.
Well, is there any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Just that I really enjoyed being with both of you today. It was good.
Me too.
It was good.
Same here. I look
I think
forward
we'll have to do it again.
Yes.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
We won't be scheduling this, folks. We're just going to do it on a, as needed basis and as available. But I too want to echo the sentiment. I've enjoyed discussing this with both of you, especially Janice. Let my gynocentrism poke out there. No, I'm a big fan.
Indeed.
I'm a big fan of both of you.
And vice versa.
And with that, I guess we will wish everybody a good day, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world.
Good. Men are good.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
See if I can turn the fucking thing off.
How do you turn